hours. The recording for people who watch later right now. Y buenas tardes. I still have to say buenas tardes. Wow, the sun is still up. So it's buenas tardes instead of buenas noches, since we still have sunlight for quite a while. Even with that, I still have my lights on. It's dark enough, but we still have sun. So, muy buenas tardes. ¿Y cómo están ustedes? ¿Cómo están todos? ¿Están bien? ¿Están bien?
Está bien.
Magnífico. Okay, vale. Bueno, I have a video we're going to start with just for a couple of yucks, a couple of ha-has, and then we're going to dive pretty deep into Destinos since we're a bit behind here, and you can ask whatever questions it is. There are always a few burning questions with that, right? Always a few. So we're going to take a look at those, but we're going to start with something. This is the thing that I know is always a burning question for everybody. Para todos, for everyone. And I actually found a little reference that will accompany this as well. It's that pesky thing of stop translating in your head, which I know that is hard for everybody to do, but you know, it never hurts to take a look at an idea, a different take on what to do about that. So we're going to take a quick look at that first, primero.
For you, if you've been learning Spanish for a while, you've learned a lot of words, you're doing all the grammar drills, but then you're in a conversation and you still feel clumsy and can't stop translating in your head.
Hola, me llamo Juan. Perdón, mi español no es tan bien. Bueno.
If that happens to you and you sometimes think, what am I doing wrong? You must watch this video, because you're probably neglecting one simple activity in your Spanish studies. The one activity that's the key to think in Spanish and having fluent sentences roll off the tongue. Well, my friend, estás de suerte, because I, teacher Juan from Spring Spanish, will reveal that one activity that will help you stop translating in your head and show you how to add it to your daily Spanish routine so you can start chatting away in Spanish. Acompáñenme. Why you always translate in your head? Let's get straight down to the facts. The only reason why you're translating a sentence word for word in your head is because your brain doesn't know what a Spanish sentence is supposed to look like. Imagine you want to say, what do you do for a living in Spanish? Do you know how to say that? Because, well, if you do, great. But if you're not absolutely certain on how to say that in Spanish, your brain will revert to the only frame of references it has, your mother tongue, and it will try to build the sentence by translating that example word for word.
Yo soy Lía, mucho gusto.
Mucho gusto, yo soy Juan.
Quick, ask something. I know. What do you do for a living? Okay, let's see. What is que? Then do you do? Man, how am I supposed to translate those three words? Right, in Spanish it's just haces, one word. Okay, then for a living, para una viviendo or just para vivir? Okay, let's try that.
¿Qué haces para vivir?
So, as you
So why would that disgust somebody? ¿Qué haces para vivir? What do you do in order to live? I don't know. Breathe? That's how somebody takes that question. What do you eat, breathe, poop? I don't know. You know, yeah. Okay. So yeah, that's not how you say, how do you earn a living? And when we're done with this, we'll take a look at something you can use to kind of help you with that too. But okay. All right.
You can see, even if you can turn this into a grammatically correct sentence, you'll still be struggling and wondering, this sounds weird. I don't know if I'm just making something up or if this is really what a native speaker will say. So what do you do if you want to stop this from happening? Easy. Just find out what a native speaker will say and then say the same thing. And you won't discover that in textbooks. You'll only discover it at the source by listening to native speakers like myself speaking Spanish all the time. It's as simple as that. Luckily, you have me here and the 5 free weekly lessons we upload from Monday to Friday on the Spring Spanish YouTube channel. Psst, subscribe now. I am a native speaker and I'll tell you that we'd say ¿en qué trabajas? Or ¿a qué te dedicas?
And those are the 2 ways you ask, what do you do for a living? ¿En qué trabajas? What do you work in? You know, what field do you work in? ¿A qué te dedicas? What do you dedicate yourself to? And that is the real general way that you hear a lot of people express that. ¿A qué te dedicas? I'm going to show you a couple of other ways you can maybe look that up because it's very easy. Just get somebody who knows how to say it. It may not be that easy for you. So I'm going to show you a couple of ways to maybe find a way to figure that out ahead of time.
So much easier, right? Now, will you have known that if you were just learning words and grammar? I don't think so. But can you now say this yourself in a conversation? Of course. And now you know this is how we say it. Will you ever translate word for word in your head again for this sentence? Never again. Here's another example. You want to say you're very busy on weekdays. How do you say on weekdays in Spanish? You won't get far with words, list, and grammar. You can try translating from English en días de semana, de la semana, en los días de la semana. You might get away with a weird version of Spanish, but here's what I, an actual native, will say. Tengo una rutina muy ocupada entre semana. So, in Spanish, we say entre semana to refer to weekdays, literally between weeks. What's the only way you know for sure native speakers say entre semana? Well, because you just heard me say it. And if you listen to a lot of Spanish speakers, you will hear them saying it too. These word combinations are chunks, and they're the key to speaking a foreign language fluently without translating in your head. Conversation-based chunking. So, your goal while speaking Spanish: listen to as much Spanish as possible.
So that is the real key, to listen to as much as possible. When they talk about chunks, it is what, in my profession, they call comprehensible input. That's the formal education lingo for that, comprehensible input. Okay, and that just means that you're getting a lot of listening input, more than reading a lot of stuff in books, although you can get some of it reading in books, but a lot of input. So we're going to show you maybe some ways to get some of that comprehensible input on your own, although still in a way it's a little artificial because, you know, a lot of times these things come up very spontaneously. You don't know what question you're going to need to ask until the moment is upon you, sadly. But he'll give a couple of cues.
As many chunks like these as possible. We call this process conversation-based chunking, and these are the steps for it. Step 1, get input.
And that means listening to a lot of people talk. So I'm going to show you some things with YouTube of how you can look some of that up for yourself. It'll be a little harder for you than it is for me. I can weed through it because there is also a lot of junk on the internet. So beware. To get input, you generally have to go to something like YouTube. But sadly, you're also going to get, like, 14-year-olds posting a homework assignment, and that's going to show up on the Google or the Google search with the YouTube search too. So you have to wade through some of it.
Listen to native speakers in conversation to discover how they speak. Step 2, identify chunks. Find word combinations like en qué trabajas or entre semana.
So finding not exact translations, but ways that words link together to form phrases that people typically use. So when they talk about chunks, they're just words that typically are used together. And that is not the same as translating word for word, because a lot of sentences do not translate at all word for word. Words that we use in English won't appear at all in the translation for that in Spanish quite often.
Step number 3, imprint them on your brain as a whole.
Well, imprint. Now, how do you do that? You do that by listening to it a lot of times and doing some sample repeating.
Memorize them so they roll off the tongue when you're speaking Spanish. And number 4, implement. Use these chunks yourself in conversation. Notice how you're not translating in your head anymore. Of course, while you're learning Spanish, you'll still want to say things you've never heard from a native speaker before. So you'll still need to improvise once in a while and maybe translate in your head while speaking Spanish. But the more you listen, the more chunks you'll discover. The more you'll know what Spanish sentence is supposed to sound and look like. And the easier it'll become for you to speak. Now check this out. If you'd like to get a head start.
Okay, so I'm going to stop him there, but the key to that, never be afraid to say, ¿cómo se dice? How do you say? Never be afraid to pop it. ¿Cómo se dice? Work at, ¿cómo se dice? Make for a living. Never be afraid to say, ¿cómo se dice? How do you say? Because they may know enough English if they can help you and give you that chunk spontaneously. But, por ejemplo, if you want to get more and more input, a good thing to do is to go into YouTube. So I'm going to stay on YouTube here for just a little bit. And wow, okay, well, I'm going to be real embarrassed if this doesn't work, but I am going to put in here Spanish. What do you do for a living? And we're going to see how to ask. How do you ask? What do you do for a living? Oh, so when you're looking at samples like this for actual input, this one, I don't know, I would have to look. Oh, it's 2.5 minutes. I have not invested a lot of time if it winds up being junk, right? But when I look at this, I absolutely know that's an input.
Hola.
That works.
En español usamos ¿a qué te dedicas? Para
And then you stop here and you put on your closed caption for subtitles.
preguntarle a alguien sobre su
Sometimes you'll have them,
profesión
sometimes
o
you won't.
sobre su ocupación. Hola, ¿cómo te llamas?
Hola, me llamo Luis.
¿Y a qué te dedicas, Luis?
Soy técnico en computación.
¿A qué te dedicas? ¿A qué te dedicas? And you be prepared. You may have to click on the gearbox, go to playback speed, and put him down to 0.75. So see, I'm going to show you the little thing. If you want to get more input and you're just curious about a particular topic, how do you talk about, I don't know, XYZ? Type it in like that. And he had it right back there. ¿A qué te dedicas? ¿A qué te dedicas? Now, you've also got to think in terms of, okay, how do you ask that same question if you're not on a tú footing? If you're not on a tú footing, just take away the S. And instead of te, you say, ¿a qué se dedica? ¿A qué se dedica? That's it. That's it. Eso es todo. That's it. Wow, you got it. So that's one way for you to get some actual feedback, because a lot of these little things, these little chunks he's talking about, do exist on the internet. And look at that. That's a 1.5 minutes to dedicate. Now, and I am going to tell you too, you'll come up with some videos like this, and I'm pretty sure this one below is probably going to tell people not to ask people what they do for a living. And you may say, well, why in God's name would you be so paranoid about that? in a lot of countries in Europe, France being one of them as well, it's very American to ask, what do you do, as an introduction to a conversation. Hey, what do you do? That is not always looked upon as a very cool thing to ask in Europe, because it's a cultural thing. It is sometimes looked upon as kind of a prying question, or perhaps better to look at as, you're not interested in me as a person if you ask what I do for a living, because what I do for a living may just be make a living, but it doesn't really say about what I'm like. It doesn't really, what I do for a living doesn't really talk about what I'm interested in, what I like to do, what I don't like to do, what my personal interests are. And there is a certain group of people that don't take as kindly to that kind of question. In an office setting, it would not be a bad thing, because you'd want to know who's the accountant versus who's the IT guy, right? So in certain settings, it's okay, but socially, I'm at a party and I'm meeting people, or I'm on the street and I'm meeting people, or I'm in a bar and I'm meeting people, it may not always be considered to be the kind of question you ask out of the gate 5 minutes into a conversation. Another source you can look at, and I do want to show you this, because sometimes you just have that burning question. I know how that goes. Never, never, never overlook wordreference.com. Because I thought, how far can I push this for them tonight? And I first typed in earn a living, and I got verbs that I knew were kind of close to asking that question, what do you do, but not quite. And what you do for a living, but then I typed it in as do for a living. Do for a living, because that's a whole, when they say chunk, they're not kidding. That's a whole string of words that string together. Living by itself doesn't cut it. Earn doesn't really quite cut it. But if you type it in as do for a living, you come up with these three, which do it. Ganarse la vida, earn a living. Dedicarse a, that would be my #1 pick. And trabajar de. And here's why you like wordreference.com. Is that when you type in some oddball things like this, sometimes it'll only look at do, but interestingly enough, it just popped these up for do for a living as a chunk. And notice it always doesn't just give you a definition like the old paper dictionaries do. They give you the actual question. They give you how this strings together in context. ¿Cómo se gana la vida? ¿A qué se dedica? And there you've got it phrased as a qué se dedica, because that's the way those words have to string together. To what do you dedicate yourself? You would never say that in English, but they've got it phrased that way to show that to you. De qué trabaja, and you'll notice in the video, he phrased it as en qué trabaja, any of those work. Any of those work. So never count out wordreference.com, because a lot of times it'll have helpful things for you. Okay, ¿está bien?
Question.
Sí.
The one, como se gana, I forget.
I'll put it back up for you.
How is that different than the other two? What's the, is there a nuance there?
Oh, ganarse is to earn one's living.
Okay.
How, ¿cómo se gana la vida? How does one earn a living? And ganarse is one of those reflexives, and here it's actually as, yeah, how does one earn a living? Ganar means to win or to earn something, like money.
So that would seem to be the least polite alternative.
Oh, the least polite. I don't
I
think
don't know.
any of those are least polite. That's a good
Okay.
question. I don't think any of those are impolite. They're all, the one that is the most textbook, let us call it, would probably be Cómo se gana la vida. The things that you would hear as a typical conversation would be a qué se dedica, this second one down here, a qué se dedica, a qué te dedicas, if you put it in tu format. And again, it's a reflexive thing. It just is. A qué se dedica, or de qué trabaja, or sometimes it's phrased with en qué trabaja. Either way. Those last two, oddly enough, I would say are more conversational. I think I hear more people use it that way. And this one especially a lot, a qué se dedica, which is really very, it sounds very cultured. What do you dedicate yourself to? Doesn't that sound cultured and really polite? Polite, but not standoffish. You know what I'm saying? Polite, but not standoffish. Very muy culto, very polite, muy cortés. So yeah, that is what works. I think my favorite, mi frase favorita, ¿a qué se dedica? ¿A qué se dedica? Eso es. Sí, sí.
When you see a list like that, you shouldn't assume that the top one's the most commonly used then. That's what.
Yeah, you know what? That one is a tough one to say. Sometimes they'll only give you one. It's that's a tough one, and I'm not going to lie to you. For me, it's easy. It's easy to tell that some things sound more formal than others. For you, that might be kind of a hard judgment call. Somebody call out a phrase that they want to know. Let's test this out on something totally new and different.
Do you have a hobby?
Do you have a hobby? Okay. I'm just going to type in hobby, and I'm going to tell you that I know a couple of different ways to express the idea for hobby. So let's put this in. I'm going to show you what they have here, because I had taken it off share. I just typed in hobby, and they put in, yeah, is your activity, hobby. This word hobby did not come into Spanish usage when I was a teenager. You never heard hobby 30 years ago. I'm just going to tell you, you did not. As far as I know, I never heard anybody use the word hobby. In all the time I was in Spain as a student, it was always pasatiempos. It was always pasatiempo, that second one. Or afición. Afición does work. Aficionado means a fan. And that word fan is even imported now. So there are some anglicismos, some English words that are creeping into Spanish, as they have done with French. Especially in the tech world, a lot. But there it's just a matter of coming over from the tech world into the workplace. But words like hobby, you did not hear very much 34 years ago. You just didn't. It was always pasatiempo, or pasatiempos plural. Tienes, and we used to use tienes. Tienes un pasatiempo. ¿Qué haces? ¿Qué haces en un rato libre? I'm going to type in free time and see what they show us with that. If they show us anything with free time. Tiempo libre. Tiempo libre. And now notice how they show you two, or not two, really, they got an English and a Spanish, a contextual example. She often reads in her free time, lee mucho en su tiempo libre. Now, I'll tell you, this is not like an absolute foolproof, but this is a really good source of information, wordreference.com. Now, okay, and don't always stop up there, because check out down here. Rato libre. Yep, I hear that a lot too. Rato is a short period of time. It sounds like rat, and it doesn't mean rat. Rato, un rato, a little while. We say a little while, they say un rato. Rato libre is some free time. Un rato libre. So ocio means leisure. That's pretty formal. You would read that, but people wouldn't use that all the time in conversation. But un rato libre or tiempo libre, you hear quite a lot. Ratos perdidos, well, maybe, but rato libre, sí. So you see, there are some ways to find some things to help you. But I would say if you're ever curious about a topic, go into the typing bar, the search box in YouTube, and always preface it with Spanish. and yeah, put in some unusual thing. Let's try one other one. Let's try one just for the heck of it to show you how this works. Sometimes I do this just when I want to get a topic. But let's see. I'm going to type in, okay. Actually, let's put in hobby. Hobby. Oop, but I have to do that Spanish thing first. Bien. Okay, vamos. I'll show you what we got here. Hobby Spanish, and they have a vocabulary video here. They've got a vocabulary and sentences. Here is going to be an interview on the street. So this is what you want to look for, where people are interviewing on the street. Okay, we're going to pull that out to give you an example. Momentito, I gotta switch my screens up. Uy, a ver. Oops. Uy, ¿dónde está? Okay. Aquí. Here we go. Now it's set up properly. Okay. We're going to take a look at that. And hobbies.
Artístico.
Oh, momento. And a lot of times I look at this because I've got like about 4 different levels of people. And so a lot of times I'm looking for something that's at a specific level for a specific class. And something may look like it's going to be a great video, but it may be too high a level or it may be too low a level. So I always have to kind of test them out first.
Hola amigos y amigas de Easy Spanish. Hoy estamos en Barcelona para preguntar a la gente cuáles son sus hobbies y cuándo
Hobbies. And look how they spelled it. Hobbies. They dragged it right out of the English.
empezaron a hacerlos. Y también si tienen algún recuerdo bonito de estos. ¿Estáis
If they have some cute memory about their hobbies. And she's going to use vosotros. Are you guys ready? ¿Estáis listos? I will perhaps slow this down a little bit for you guys. No, momentito. A ver, okay.
listos? Vamos. ¿Cuál es tu hobby?
Jugar al baloncesto
¿Cuándo empezaste?
con 9 años.
Con 9 años. Oh, how do you say at 9 years old or when I was 9 years old? There's how you say it. This is how you look for a chunk. Con 9 años.
Pues pintar.
And notice they're going to express these usually as the infinitive. What's your hobby? Doing this. So what do we say in English? What's your hobby? Painting, playing hockey, gardening. Ing. How do they do that in Spanish? You're going to see infinitive, 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 infinitive. Just watch. I bet I will be right.
Hacer joyas.
Making jewelry.
Y bueno, trabajo también con niños
I
pequeños,
work with
así
little
que la
kids.
parte más, bueno, de experimentar con cosas así de pintura, educación, los niños pequeños y tal.
Mi hobby es, bueno, salir a la montaña y sobre todo caminar. Me gusta mucho.
Infinitive,
Las
infinitive.
motos también me gustan mucho y la naturaleza, estar al aire libre. Cualquier actividad es buena para
And here's another good chunk for you to know how to talk about the outdoors.
mí.
Estar al aire libre. Being outdoors. That's being outdoors. Estar al aire libre. Al aire libre. It's got to be in that chunk. Al aire libre. To the air open. Free air. Who knew air was free? Yeah. Al aire libre. Open air. When you talk about going to a fair that is outdoors or going to an open air market, that's what they call an open air market. Un mercado al aire libre. Al aire libre. And that's the chunk for talking about outdoors. Al aire libre. It's what they call a chunk.
La naturaleza, estar al aire libre. Cualquier actividad es buena para mí.
Los deportes.
¿Deportes?
And here he
Para
just
mí
gave an
bailar.
bailar,
¿Y cuándo
infinitive.
empezaron a practicar deportes
When
y a
did you
bailar?
start?
Bueno, de toda la vida, yo creo. Desde muy niño.
Here's another chunk you can use to talk about age. Desde muy niño, from the time of being very little. Desde niño, and muy he just put in there to emphasize really little, to make it not just as a kid, but as a real little kid. Desde muy niño.
El deporte y el baile venía en la sangre.
Lo mismo digo yo, porque siempre yo soy de Colombia y ahí siempre, vamos, desde que ya tenemos razón, bailamos.
¿Hay algún baile típico?
Salsa, salsa caleña porque somos del valle, la capital es Cali y se baila mucho la salsa, pero se baila de todo un poco.
And you'll notice when they interview people in Spain, a lot of people they interview in Spain are not from Spain because Spain experiences much as the United States does. There are a lot of people who are fleeing from other places of Latin America and come to Spain to try to make a living or to visit for vacation. A lot of people from Venezuela, Colombia, places where there are some conflicts and issues. Of course, now with the virus, you'll notice they're both masked. There have been restrictions as well, but there's been a great immigration there. Spain has immigration issues as we do. They accept a lot of people from the Spanish diaspora. Yeah, that's happening there quite a lot too.
Cumbia y eso.
Es jugar al Pokémon Go.
Jugar al Pokémon.
¿Desde cuándo juegas?
Pues desde que salió. Sí.
Since I came out, since I was
2016.
born.
¿Y con qué frecuencia?
Demasiada. 2, 3, 4 horas al día.
Mi hobby es la música. Toco el bajo y la batería.
¿Cuándo empezaste?
Hace 20 años o así. Empecé a tocar la batería, estuve muchos años tocando la batería y luego hace 3 años o así empecé a tocar el bajo y la verdad es que muy contento.
Mi hobby es hacer deporte.
¿Practicas algún deporte en concreto?
Ahora mismo no estoy practicando ningún deporte, pero me gusta todo, desde salir a correr, ir al gimnasio, practicar pádel, lo que sea. Sí, sí.
¿Y cuándo empezaste a practicar deporte?
Desde bastante pequeño.
Desde pequeño. Desde pequeño, same as desde niño. So there you got a chunk. Desde niño. So these are ways when you're curious about a particular topic, how to say something, go on into YouTube. If you see a video that's more than 10, 15 minutes, no, because it's going to get very didactic and long in the tooth. But these little short things that are 10, 12 minutes, yeah, go for it. And they'll show you the chunks. They'll show you the chunks of how things are typically used. It can be super, super helpful. Okay, bien?
Sí.
Magnifico. Just a way to do some research, because sometimes, you just get the itch. There's something you just want to know. Como se dice? How do you say that? Some of you email me, which is just fine. But sometimes you can't wait for me because I might be out doing something. So, when that happens, there are some resources for you to use. But that video talking about talking in chunks, there's a lot of validity to that. But, you may not have somebody you can call up and say, yeah, how do you say this? So the alternative is plug on into YouTube, put in the word Spanish first, and then put in a topic. And you will almost undoubtedly come up with something that is going to be of use for you, something that will be helpful. Okay? ¿Está bien? Está bien. Okay.
Está bien.
Sí, una pregunta. Karen, ¿tienes pregunta?
Not a question, but for my birthday, my husband gave me a whole stack of Capitan Alatriste books, all in Spanish, which is way above my head. I mean, I don't have the vocabulary. Wow. So I took a book out of the library in English. So I read the English and then I tried to read the Spanish and go, all right, I don't know all those words, but I know what it says because I read it in English and I know the story. So anyway, but one of the phrases that the boy uses in that is cuando fuera mozo.
Oh, mozo. Sí, mozo. A kid. Mozo is, I was going to say more a Spain thing, but that's not necessarily true. I know I hear Argentines use it as well.
Yeah, when I looked it up on Spanish, it
mozo
said as a waiter or something like that.
The word that Karen is talking about is mozo. So I put it in the chat box. So if you haven't activated your chat box, do so. Mozo. Mozo, which in Spain, I would pronounce that mozo. 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 This is kind of like in garçon. If you go into France and, they call the waiter garçon, which means boy, which sounds kind of demeaning. Hey, boy, come here. Yeah, we would not do this in the States, right? But mozo is often used to call a waiter. Mozo means a boy. It would mean a young boy, not an itty bitty rugrat age kid, but like muchacho age, muchacho chico, yeah, that kind of age. Mozo is sometimes used to refer to waiters, as a general term, like garçon, which means boy in French, is used to refer to waiters in France. Mozo is oftentimes used to say like, oh, he was always a good kid or a good guy. So it can be used in that term. That particular book series probably has, Karen, the added difficulty of that goes back to like the 1700s, which you're going to get some archaic kind of language, which would be like us reading things from time of the American Revolution.
There's a lot of past tense and there's vosotros and I haven't gotten
a lot of vosotros. Yeah, you'll see a lot of vosotros in that. So yeah, let me know when you run into that. Actually, another good strategy though, besides these little novelas, which actually your husband was thinking along the right lines, it can often help to get a book you've already read in English. But don't pick, War and Peace.
Yeah.
Okay. pick a little novel that you have read in English and get a Spanish version of it. And not quite often you can get this via ebook. Nook and Kindle have a lot of them. The reason I say get a book you've already read is because you know what's coming. So you can either get both versions out and do kind of a quick comparison. We should do this with teenage kids with Harry Potter because every kid read Harry Potter. And that is a hard thing, but for the upper level kids to do, they could take a few chapters, maybe not the whole book, but they could take a few chapters because it was a story they were already familiar with. And that whole thing of take a movie you've already seen a gazillion times and plug it in and put in the Spanish subtitles, because when you know the story ahead of time, you'll suddenly see these chunks pop up and it'll be like, oh, I know the line in the movie is da, 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 da. And here it is in Spanish. And so these are all little strategies you can use to get what they call in the biz, comprehensible input, meaning the way a native speaker would spit this out. Okay.
Hey, what my husband thinks I should do is go on the computer and make a big chart and type in all the verbs and type in all the tenses they are. And I said, forget it, no way, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, I don't know that I would do that. Well, you know, if you're really in a dedicated way trying to learn a bunch of tenses, it might be okay to take, I would say, maybe up to 50 verbs that are commonly used and take a look at how all those conjugations go. But I wouldn't go wild with yeah, it's very hard to think in terms of tables. I kind of can do it, but I'm coming from a different background. So when I do my little French lessons, I do use tables because I'm used to that. And my brain can just go to the right table. And the way I think of tables, actually, I should tell you this because it may help somebody. When you look at verb tables, verb conjugation charts, the thing that holds you back is that people memorize them in order.
Mm-hmm.
That holds you back because you think in that order. But my brain, because I am so old and I've been doing this for so long, is I don't think in that order. I think in terms of singular and plural. So something that may help you in terms of using charts is don't memorize them in order, but think of them as onesie and twosie. And everything on one side is talking about this many people. So it all depends on if the this many people is me. So think of it this way, think of it with gestures. The onesie chart is yo, tú, and él y usted, one person. So how I used to do this with little kids who do not know grammar and do not put a chart in front of a 7-year-old that they don't know what you're talking about, okay, is we would go with yo, tú, and then él y usted, okay? We would go with that order. And it would all be done by gestures. And every time they said a verb, it would be tomo agua. ¿Tomas agua también? No, él toma agua. So if you think in terms of one person doing the action or more than one, singular and plural, that automatically makes it a little bit easier for your brain to project to the right form. Because you always know if you want to talk about yo versus talking to somebody, addressing them as tú versus one person versus plurals. You know, with plurals, it's either I'm in the group or I'm not in the group and I'm talking about more than one. So the way we would do that with little kids was the yo verb always got this action. So every time they use, they'd always have to say it as tomo, tomas, toma, tomamos, toman. More than one hand for more than one person. Okay, and nosotros was always a we thing, saying that I'm in the group. So if you think of the chart more from the standpoint of one Z person versus more than one, that might help you a little bit to get out of the habit of yo, tú, él, ella, usted. It might help. It's the way we think that, it's the way we visualize it that sometimes holds us back. In, okay? Jan, see.
Fred and I are not reading War and Peace, but we do have, we found this adorable book. It's the Desert Story, The Three Javelinas.
Oh, sí, me
But
gusta, sí.
They also have Los Tres Pequeños Jabalíes. And the cool thing about this book is they have the English and the Spanish on the same page.
Okay, yeah.
So you can
Yeah.
read it in Spanish and then go, what are they talking about? And then you read it in English and then you reverse engineer what they're saying.
Yes.
And so I'm sure there's some other kids' books that are just really great.
Some kids' books will surprisingly get into very deep into commands. Very deep into past tense, more so than you would think, because when you tell a story, often it's going to be in the past.
Yeah.
So they'll just naturally be, you know, in that verb set, in that time frame. I have some stories that are set up as bilingual in that way. I'll have to think of some ways to incorporate some of those for some for maybe summer session where you have it side by side. And again, that kind of does help quite a lot, because you can see the chunk in English and the chunk in Spanish, and whoa, those look really, really different. And when you compare them right there side by side, you automatically see how they align. So I'll try to think of a way to maybe kind of note that. Yeah, see, Federico.
So where I always get tripped up, as you've heard so many times before that you're tired of me saying it.
I don't get tired. It's normal. Es normal.
Are the pronouns, right? So I look at, you know, Destinos, and it's a ti, te. It's like, oh God, alrighty, I don't know what the hell we're talking about. Then we run into ti, lo, and I go, oh God, I got no idea what they're talking about, right? And do you have one of these little books, these simple little books where there's Spanish and English, and it is a massive amount of these pronouns where I can understand, you know, he, she, or it?
I have to say off the top of my head, no, I don't have anything that isolates quite for that subset. That doesn't mean it isn't out there. I will keep looking for that. That is something that, and Fred, it will make you happy to know that this causes a problem for me in German, because even though I know indirect and direct, I kind of, it's like, is it the dich or the dir? Which one is it? And yeah, because even though I'm very used to it in Spanish, translating that into what it is in another language can sometimes be an issue. But that, I think that is better addressed with typically the kinds of verbs that will use an indirect versus a direct. So we'll maybe do some work on that, not spring session here, but summer. Because that's kind of a big topic. But if you get to know the kinds of verbs that typically take, you know, it's always that thing of it, is it a lo or is it a le? Is it a la or is it a le? All that, yeah, all that. And I see some of you nodding, because for you to be struggling with this is a perfectly normal thing, because we don't have the range of distinctions that they have in other languages. So Getting to know which verbs you'll typically use that le or les with is, in my opinion, more helpful. I mean, ultimately, these are the kind of things I will hear it with, so that you associate it with those kind of verbs.
Okay.
And then it becomes a group of words that work together. So, okay, por ejemplo, I'm going to give you a quick example of what I mean. If you want to say, I told him. How many times in English you say, I told him? I told her. I told them. Okay, this is a group of phrases that we use a lot in English. I said to him. I said to her. Okay, you got to know how to say I said. You only have to know one word. Dije. I'm going to put it down in chat box. Okay, that part of it is very, very easy. You know, all you got to know is dije. I said, I told. If you want to say I told or I said, it's dije. And that's the only word you need. Dije. It doesn't look like decir, does it? It's an oddball. It's an oddball ending, but how often do you say I said? A lot. Okay. One thing to know is that dije very seldom exists or is said by itself. Isolated. Very seldom. Like I can't even come up with, no, you don't. It's always something like one of the following. Le dije. It always pairs up with a pronoun. Dije is almost always going to pair up with a pronoun. Because if you're going to say I said, well, I said something to somebody. Who'd you tell it to? And that little word before, it tells me what you said to. Who did you say it to? So le dije, it's always going to march along with, if I said it to one person, it's going to march along with le dije. Le dije. If I said something to more than one person, it's always going to march along with les dije. Okay. And now, why is it? This is hard for a lot of reasons. Number one, dije, sure, does not look or sound like this. That's the infinitive it comes from. D-E-C-I-R. How do you get to D-I-J-E? Good God. Okay. It's a past tense and it's a very irregular past tense. But everybody, I said, right? Can you say, I told it to him? I told it to him. No, you have to know it goes from tell to told. I said it to him. You have to know it becomes said. All languages have these funky irregular verbs. So here's the I said or I told, right? It comes from decir, but it comes out as if I did it, it's dije. And it's le dije to one person, it's le dije to more than one person. And now, easier to figure that out for I told you, right? Because te dije makes more sense, right? Te dije makes more sense. I'm not going to combine it with I told us. No, because we don't say that. Yeah. I told myself. Well, you might if you're really talking about talking to yourself, but that's not 90% of your conversation, is it? Yeah. So in some ways, it's more helpful to know, oh, decir. Here's the kind of verb. I'm going to look it up with a le or les a lot. I could also say, here's a verb I link up a lot with le and les a lot. Traer, to bring, right? And again, oh my God, this is going to be, of course, it has to be highly irregular in past. Traje, but I brought it to somebody, right? And the to somebody could be a te if I'm talking to you, right? But it's more than likely going to be a le traje, I brought him or I brought her, or les traje, I brought them something, right? So certain verbs lend themselves more to these le and les combos as things that link together and become what they call chunks in that video. That makes sense? See?
Yeah, helps.
Okay, a little bit, but we probably need some review practice on what kind of verbs do that. And then you got to go out and practice doing that. And maybe we'll do that next week. Maybe we won't wait. Okay.
So I probably shouldn't switch to German, right?
No, please don't do that. I still struggle with cases. Oh, cases. Oh my God. Yeah. That. But again, something that I know is very, very normal for people to struggle with. So, okay. Bien, fantástico. Although my daughter, of course, tells me in a very superior way, you know, it was very easy for me to learn German because I already knew indirect and direct, and I got that dir and dich thing exactly. And I'm like, oh, good for you. I'm glad you could. Okay, let's start off with our walkthrough of Destinos. Let's start off because wow, hay mucho. Should we start with the si supieras? Because we really did not walk through the si supieras. Exactly. Wow, where's my thing to go to the big screen? Aquí viene, here it comes. And this is always set on kind of a low setting. Let's fast forward. Y vamos a hablar aquí. Okay. Oh, we've got the me pregunto. Here's the I wonder phrase. Me pregunto. Me pregunto is a good chunk for you guys to know. ¿Dónde está me pregunto? Where'd it go? Me pregunto.
¿Qué civilización le interesaba tanto a Roberto?
Ay, pues no sé. Nunca le pregunté.
Sabemos que excavaban una tumba. Me pregunto qué clase de...
Me pregunto, I wonder. They don't have a separate verb for wonder. They use preguntar to ask a question, and they make it reflexive. Because when you wonder, you're asking yourself something. It's pretty logical. Es lógico. Me pregunto. I wonder. Y hablaron de arqueología, su interés. One thing I want you to notice is that they switched a lot in between the two past tenses when they talked about la civilización Maya. And it's always Maya, it never changes to Mayo, just like with Azteca, it's always Azteca, it never changes to Azteco. It's always Azteca, it's always Maya, it just is. But gobernaban un vasto imperio, they used to govern, okay? You know, if the idea is that you want to say this was what went on for a very long period, but you don't confine it to how long it happened, imperfecto, right? So a lot of this was plugged in here to give you a feel for how the two different tenses with past tense, one versus another. Las Mayas habitaban, they used to inhabit, because we're not talking about from this year to that year, that would be pretérito, but they used to inhabit. It's vague. So anytime it's vague, it becomes a description, and that means it goes to what they call imperfecto, right?
De México que se llama Yucatán. También vivían en las regiones de...
Vivían en las regiones, they used to live in the regions. So we might say they lived in the regions of Chiapas, Tabasco, y Campeche, but vivían, they used to live. They were living. Anytime you say used to do something or was doing something, they were doing something, it becomes imperfecto, which means it's going to be the aba endings or the ia endings, right? Aba for the AR verbs, or the ia endings for the ER and IR verbs. So anytime you see the ian, oh, that's for an IR verb, that's imperfecto. It was going on for a long time. And we're not talking about how long, like a specific set of time with this beginning and this ending, just they used to do this. So it becomes imperfecto.
Chiapas, Tabasco y Campeche, y en partes de Centroamérica. Los mayas nunca formaron un gran imperio con una ciudad capital. Lo que existía era una serie de estados.
Lo que existía, what used to be out there, what used to exist was a series of autonomous states. And again, we're not pegging them with a year, so they use imperfecto to talk about the past.
Sus propias ciudades centrales. Mérida, Uxmal, Chichen Itza.
And all of these, of course, come from the lenguajes indígenas, all of these place names, as many of our place names in the United States come from indigenous languages. Many of their indigenous, many of their place names, geographical names, do come from indigenous languages. Chichen Itza comes from way back.
Copán y otras. Según los datos, entre los años 300 y 900 después de Cristo, la civilización maya llegó a su máximo apogeo.
And notice why, oh, look, notice when they go to, we're pegging a year. Between the years 300 and 900 after Christ, después de Cristo. So now that I am pegging it within a defined beginning and end, I'm going to use pretérito, not imperfecto.
La civilización maya llegó a su...
Llegó. The civilization reached its high point. So all these were plugged in here to show you, oh, we're going to switch between the two different past tenses. And if you're very clever and you go back and listen, there are little clues about now we're going to have to use pretérito because I have told you specific year dates. And now I have to go into pretérito instead of imperfecto.
Mucho antes que la de los aztecas. Durante esta época, los mayas hicieron grandes avances en los campos de la astronomía y las matemáticas.
And they made great advances in astronomy and mathematics. That's what they were known for.
En templos como los de Chichen Itza, los astrónomos mayas, por ejemplo, calcularon el número exacto de días y horas que tenía el año.
And they calculated the exact number of days and weeks. Somebody did it, but calculated, somebody actually calculated, figured out a calendar. So that goes into pretérito. But then that the year had is really a description. So it goes into imperfecto. Remember, imperfecto always tells us what used to happen or what was going on, or it talks about descriptions. And how many days the year had, we're just talking about a description of the year. So it's tenía, imperfecto.
También sabían todos los ciclos de los eclipses solares y lunares.
They knew all the cycles of eclipses, solar and lunar eclipses.
Ninguna otra civilización del mundo ha mostrado tanta aptitud para las matemáticas y la astronomía.
Okay, so there we got that little bit I wanted to show you because they really, they really get into pretérito and imperfecto. And now here we come, Fred. Here comes two pronouns. Not one, but two.
Siguen discutiendo.
Siguen discutiendo. They keep on fighting.
Can you turn the volume up a little bit?
That is at max. And I'm going to see if I can turn up my volume here a little bit to see if it will, a little bit. I'm probably going to have to crank it up. I don't know why there are such vast differences in sound on YouTube, but for some reason, there really are. And it's not helpful. You either become a deaf person or can't hear it at all.
Sobre el regreso de ella.
That's better.
Un poquito mejor, ¿no?
No puedes irte justo ahora.
Oh, I think we missed his little
Patty y
thing.
Juan siguen discutiendo sobre el regreso de ella a Nueva York.
Patty, ya te lo dije.
Ya te lo dije. Ya te lo dije. I already said it to you. I've already told, and the law is just very general, you know. It's like telling somebody, I told you 100 times. Law just refers to the thing they're fighting about. Yeah, the law isn't referring to any special thing like, you know, lo, el vaso, or lo, un lápiz. You know, it's not a thing, but the law is just what they've been fighting about. It's just it. Te lo dije. Ya te lo dije. I already told you. And they like to put an it in there because they're fighting about something, right? See?
No puedes irte justo ahora.
You can't leave right now.
No me grites así, Juan.
No me grites. Don't yell at me. No me grites. Wow, she gave him a command. She gave him a command. No me grites. No me grites así. Don't yell at me like that. No me grites. She's literally asking him not to do this or telling him not to do this.
Ya traté de explicarte los
I
problemas
tried to
de la producción en
explain.
Nueva York. No entiendo por qué actúas como un niño mimado.
I don't know why you act like a spoiled little boy.
¿Cómo puedes hacerme esto?
How can I do this?
Todo te lo hacen a ti.
Oh, todo te lo hace. Everybody does it to you. Eres la víctima. You're the victim. Pobre Juan. Everybody does something to you. Yeah.
Tus problemas son los más graves.
Your problems are the
A
worst.
veces dudo que a ti te importen los demás.
Sometimes I doubt that you care about anybody else at all.
Importa mi papá.
Me importa mi papá. My father matters to me. My father is important to me. This is a verb just like gustar. When you say me gusta, I like something and I like one thing. Oh, importar is to matter, to be important. It's got important, importar. Importar has important buried in it. If something is important to you, this thing is important to me. So that's why the me is there. Me tells who it's important to. And it's his father who's important. To me matters my father. And we would never say it that way in English. And if he were really sticking the knife in, Patty, at this point, he would add an a mí in front of that. A mí me importa mi papá. If he really wanted to dig the knife in. A mí me importa. A mí would make that more like that. Okay? Bien?
Papá.
¿Sí? Entonces, ¿por qué no estás más tiempo con él en el hospital?
Yeah, why aren't you with him more in the hospital?
Peleándote conmigo cuando él te necesita.
You spend all this time with me. And he needs you. Él te necesita. He needs you. Okay. Okay. And then they go through profesiones, which we don't need to go through here. La discusión entre Arturo y Pedro.
¿Algún dato sobre el accidente en la excavación? Seguramente, pero ya es tarde.
Okay. Y aquí Pedro y Arturo se conocen, they meet each other por primera vez, ¿no? Por primera vez. Se conocen, they meet each other. Se conocen. Y hablan de Roberto,
Por si Raquel llama.
Raquel y todo.
También podría llamar allí. Seguramente llamará. Si tengo
Y
alguna
tienen
noticia,
planes,
inmediatamente, por favor. Aunque sea tarde,
van
cualquier hora.
tienen planes, hacen planes para cuando regrese Roberto. They're making plans for when Roberto gets back, when everybody else gets back. Aunque sea tarde, they're talking about when something happens, you know, when people get back, when people start coming in, or when you find out what's going on. Even if it is late, aunque sea tarde, even though it is late, a cualquier hora, llama, call. Call whatever the time may be. And he uses subjunctive.
Yeah, yeah.
Aunque means although, or even if. So he's telling him, even if it's really late, like an ungodly hour, llámame, call me, okay? So he uses aunque sea, even if it may be late, because he doesn't know when he's going to call yet. They don't know when they're going to find these people. They don't know when they're going to cart them in off that field. So he uses subjunctive because they don't know what the future holds. Subjunctive, which looks exactly like commands, is there to talk about events where they don't exist in the world of reality. They're not in the realm of it's really happening. Okay. Roberto at this point is not back yet.
Lo mismo usted a mí, por supuesto. Ha sido un gusto, doctor.
It has been a pleasure. Ha sido un gusto. El gusto ha sido mío. Espero que pueda. Espero que pueda. And here is what you were practicing last week.
Cualquier hora. Lo mismo usted a mí, por supuesto. Ha sido un gusto, doctor. El gusto ha sido mío.
Espero que pueda conocer. I hope
pueda conocer a toda la familia.
You can meet, I hope you can meet the whole family. I hope you can know the whole family, but here it's used as in meet for the first time. And he puts that at, I hope this can happen. He hasn't met them yet. It's not in the realm of reality. I hope you can meet everybody. I hope, I'm doing the hoping that you are able to do this. Okay?
Esto haya pasado. Bien, debo apresurarme. Estamos en contacto.
Apresurarme is just I should hurry up. I should be off on my way. Bien, bien, bien. Y van a hablar de la pobre Ofelia. ¿Quién es Ofelia? ¿Quién es Ofelia?
La secretaria.
We could ask this question. ¿A qué se dedica Ofelia? ¿A qué se dedica Ofelia? And the answer would be, we wouldn't even use, you could say se dedica a, you could, yeah. No, es secretaria, she's a secretary. ¿A qué se dedica Ofelia? Es secretaria, ¿no? Bien, okay.
De Carlos.
De Carlos. ¿Y dónde vive Ofelia? ¿Dónde vive Ofelia?
Vive en Miami.
Vive en Miami, en la Florida, en Miami. Y Ofelia es, no tengo duda, es cubana. Es cubana. She's Cuban. Because you can tell from her accent. She swallows her S's. So that's how I know she's Cuban. If you listen to her talk very, very carefully, she kind of self-swallow the S's thing. Okay.
Ay, esto no puede ser.
That can't be.
Pronto lo van a saber.
Soon they're gonna find out. Me pregunto, I wonder. Here comes the I wonder again. Me pregunto. I wonder if Mr. Castillo already knows it. So if you know something, it becomes lo, this very, yeah. She's just talking about the figures, something not looking right, yeah? The finances. So lo, I know is masculine for it, but you know, when we're just talking about something in its most general terms, they'll throw in lo, right? Because I'm not talking about a specific thing like this or a specific thing like this, yeah? So lo, it is talking about the finances. Eso es todo, that's it. hablando un poquito aquí, and it's just a lot of waiting. And I think we're going to move on pretty close. Oh, they do talk a lot about professions and what they studied and all that. Oh, but you see, perdón, un momento. Nunca le dije. You never see decir used by itself.
¿Negocios tú? Mi mamá quería que yo estudiara para ser abogada.
My mom always wanted me to study to be a lawyer.
Raquel me decía.
Raquel me decía. Raquel, she used to say to me. Because undoubtedly her mother didn't tell her, go be a lawyer only this many times. Yeah. Se mete en todo. She sticks her nose in everything. So, you know, her mom probably told her over and over. Me decía, she used to tell me. So you never see decir used without a pronoun. You'll just never hear it that way.
Estudia para abogada. Es una buena profesión. Parece que seguiste los consejos de tu mamá. Mi papá nunca le dijo nada.
Nunca le dijo. You never see dijo or dije used by itself. It's always together with a pronoun. Siempre, siempre le dijo, le dijo, le dijo. Mi papá nunca le dijo nada a Roberto, and she stuck in an a Roberto to make sure that we know that the le is talking about Roberto. Okay, my dad never told Roberto.
Nada, Roberto. Aunque yo sé que él prefería que estudiara para ser médico o para ingeniero. Ahora comprendo por qué.
Okay, I don't think we're going to have a whole lot more here, so we're going to move on pretty soon to el próximo episodio. El próximo episodio, que es éxito. Empezamos con el accidente. We start with this almost accident, casi, almost. ¿Es éxito? Sí. Ok. Oh, no, momento. Wait a minute. I think it went back.
El gusto ha sido mío.
Perdón. No, I guess that is okay. Sí.
They always go back.
Yeah, they always go back. Okay.
Yeah.
A ver. Oh, el pobre Roberto. Pobre Roberto.
No se preocupe, señorita.
No se preocupe. It's a command. Don't do this. Don't worry. No se preocupe. No se preocupe. Don't worry.
Está inconsciente, pero parece que está bien.
He's unconscious, but he seems okay.
No estás seguro.
Aren't you sure?
Aparentemente está bien. Respira normalmente. No tiene fracturas. La temperatura y la presión son normales.
So he talked about his temperature, you know, his pressure, his temperature.
Considerando lo que ha pasado.
Nothing broken.
De todos modos, es necesario llevarlo a un hospital para hacer un examen completo.
And llevarlo. It's necessary to take him. Llevar is moving something from one place to another. Yeah. Es necesario llevarlo. It's necessary to take him. So they're going to move him. You know from that sentence that they're going to actually transport him someplace. Para hacerle un examen completo, to make a full to make a full exam of him, because they're going to examine him, scans, all that stuff, right? Éxito means success, not exiting, even though they're exiting one hospital to get into the plane, to exit the plane. Éxito does not talk about an exit. Y un helicóptero. Aquí. Se da un portazo. Portazo es una palabra muy importante. Cuando una persona está muy enojado y cierra la puerta muy fuerte, es un portazo. Un portazo is slamming a door. Yeah. Se da un portazo means somebody slammed a door. That's how you say slammed. Or, well, here it's in present. Somebody slams the door. Se da un portazo. Somebody slams it.
Is that about giving a slam? Giving a slam?
Right. Eso es. That's the way it is expressed. Se da un portazo. Portazo is never a good thing. Portazo means you're like as hard as you can. Aquí viene Patty. Aquí viene Patty. Muy deprisa, in a hurry, muy deprisa. Y sale muy deprisa. Y el pobre Juan. Que no sigue, who does not follow, no sigue. No la sigue, he does not follow her. No la sigue. Está al aire libre, she's outside. Está al aire libre. Está fuera de la casa. Y aquí viene Mercedes. Mercedes viene a hablar con Patty, ¿verdad? ¿Y qué dicen? Bueno, mira, Patty. Ah, here is kind of a good chunk for you to know. Ah, momentito, mira, Patty.
Juan no entiende. Yo tengo que ir a Nueva York.
Bueno, Juan siempre ha sido un poco egocéntrico.
Egocéntrico.
Para decirlo francamente, sí.
Por fin alguien comprende.
Mira, Patty, yo creo que tú tienes...
Creo que tú tienes toda la razón. You have all the right. When you want to really emphasize that somebody is 100%, they, you know, they really nailed it. They hit the nail on the head. You're completely right. This is the way of telling somebody you are 100% right. Tienes toda la razón. Toda la razón means you're completely correct. You're completely in the right. My brother is a doofus. She's basically, without calling him a doofus, saying, yeah, you're totally right. And he's wrong. Okay. Tú tienes toda la razón. Toda la razón, all the reason or all the right, you're 100% correct, Patty.
Toda la razón en querer regresar a Nueva York.
You're completely right wanting to go back.
Si tu trabajo lo requiere.
Your job needs you. He'll get over it.
Papá lo está afectando mucho, claro, pero hay que ser optimista.
Hay que ser optimista. One must be optimistic. Hay que is like say, yeah, you have to. You have to, and she's not making it personal to Patty. She's not using it with tú, she's using it with I. And I is that anonymous, it's always I. It's never a yo form, it's never a tú form, it's always I que. One must be optimistic. So you have to be optimistic. So she tells her to look on the bright side without putting all the weight of it on her by not making it a tú thing. Hay que ser optimista, you have to be optimistic.
Todavía recuerdo el día de tu boda.
I still remember the day of your wedding. Como si fuera hoy, as if it were today. We often say as if it were yesterday, don't we? I remember that as if it were yesterday. And here she phrases it as if it were right now, meaning, wow, it's that clear. It's like it's like I'm right there now. Como si fuera hoy, as if it were. And this is a past subjunctive. Como si fuera, as if it were. And of course, her wedding was not today. So it's talking about a situation that does not exist. So that's why they use subjunctive, because we talk about subjunctive for things that are not in the realm of reality. And her wedding is not today. Y hablan un poquito de las relaciones.
La familia es lo más importante.
La familia es family is the most important thing. Somos una familia muy unida. Muy unida means tight, close. So if you look up close family, es una familia muy unida. And that looks like united. And it does mean united. But that's the group of words to say a close family. Somos una familia muy unida. So if you want to say we have a close family or we are a close family, we are a tight family, you use this phrase of unida.
Pues bien, yo quiero darte la bienvenida a nuestra familia.
Oh, I want to welcome you to our family.
Gracias, Mercedes. Quiero que sepas que
Quiero que sepas, I want that you should know. I'm one person. I want that you other person, I want you to do this. I want you to know that from today on, que desde hoy, from today on,
desde hoy más que una cuñada eres como una hermana para mí.
more than a sister-in-law, you're like a sister to me.
Fuera tu hermana.
Puedes contar conmigo. You can count on me. Contar con, and then a person. Contar con with a person. To count on somebody is this phrase, contar con. Cuento con mi esposo. I count on my husband. Cuento con mis hijos. I count on my family, meaning you rely on somebody. Cuento con. Cuento con. Puedes contar conmigo. You can count on me. Como si fuera, as if I were. I'm not your sister, but as if I were your sister. Como si fuera. Como si fuera is a chunk you should learn. Como si fuera, as if I were. Como si fuera. Como si fuera tu hermana, as if I were your sister.
Les deseo a ti y a Juan toda la alegría y la felicidad del mundo.
I wish you all the happiness in the world. Ay, qué magnífico. Y música de órgano. Y hablan un poquito de relaciones de novios. We use the word novios for boyfriend and girlfriend, serious, not first time going out on a date. We use novios also to refer to newlyweds. Novios often refers also not just to boyfriend, girlfriend, or to fiancés, but to newlyweds. Okay. Los novios, and here they are, engaged people. And noviazgo is the term they use for engagement. El periodo de sus relaciones, el noviazgo. El noviazgo talks about engagement. Okay.
El noviazgo. Durante el noviazgo, los novios siguen viéndose.
Siguen viéndose. They keep on seeing each other. They continue going out. They continue dating. Siguen viéndose. And the viéndose is seeing each other. So they keep dating, is what that means.
Crece y también hacen planes para su boda.
Los declaro marido y mujer.
Marido is just a fancier word for esposo. Marido is used more in Spain than it is in Latin America. Marido would be used for something formal like a wedding ceremony, to say husband and wife. And notice it's not esposa, it's mujer, it's woman. Because yeah, your woman is your wife. So when you hear mujer, it sounds a little possibly as a Neanderthal type reference, but mujer usually means wife. Even though, you know, if you're very feminista, it may sound a little antiquated, but Mujer will mean wife. Donde está tu mujer does not really mean where is your woman. It means where is your wife. Okay. And the French use the same thing because they use femme, which means, woman, to say wife as well. So it's a thing that came down from the Latin cultures, I imagine. Okay. Y hablan de la boda. La boda es la ceremonia, la boda, the wedding. Okay. Beso, beso. Well, of course, everybody has that first kiss. La nueva pareja. And pareja will mean a couple. It literally does mean pair. La nueva pareja, the new couple. Okay. Y la luna de miel. They do literally have the same term as we have of honeymoon. Luna de miel, moon of honey. Luna de miel. So I'm sure there's some big old connection with Latin there. Somewhere way back culturally. Okay. Y hablan de la luna. Divorcio. No sabemos si van a seguir. Y ahora, and now we've got some advice that's going to come up between the two brothers, entre los hermanos.
Lo único que ocurre es que Patty quiere atender su trabajo.
She wants to tend to her work.
Precisamente por eso. Creo que a Patty le importa más su trabajo que yo.
I think that Patty's work matters more to her than I do. Le importa, it matters to her.
Juan, quisiera decirte algo.
I would like to tell you something. He is softening this. Not quiero decirte. Quiero has a lot of punch to it. Quiero has force. I want. He knows that, Juan is in a very bad place mentally right now. So he soft pedals it. Quisiera, you take the foot off the pedal and it softens the quiero. Quisiera, I would like to tell you something. So he's not going to force himself on his brother in his time of my life sucks. Yeah, what's that?
No es posible que...
Perhaps might it be possible?
Dilo, Ramón.
Just say it, Ramón.
¿Qué? Somos hermanos. Bueno, yo en tu lugar me sentiría celoso.
I in your place, I would feel jealous. Sentirse is to feel an emotion. It is not sentarse, to sit down. It is sentirse. It is it is not the AR verb of sitting down. It is the IR verb of I feel an emotion. Me sentiría, and that's a conditional. It means I would. I would in your place. If I were you, I would feel jealous. Me sentiría celoso.
¿Celoso? ¿De quién?
Of whom?
No es de quién.
Not of whom,
Sino de qué.
but rather of what?
Mejor debo decir, tendría envidia.
I would be envious. La dura verdad, the
Sé que
sad
Patty es muy
truth.
inteligente, que tiene mucho talento. Es escritora, productora y directora y también profesora de teatro. Ramón, ¿crees que tengo envidia del éxito de mi esposa?
Do you think I'm jealous of my wife's success? Oh, no answer. The silent.
Hand on the shoulder, the hand on the shoulder.
The silent yes. The dreaded silent yes. Ay, okay. Well, la dura verdad. Yeah, the hard truth. Okay. Y hablaron de otra pareja. They talked about a different couple. And now they're not talking about Juan y Patty, pero de Raquel y Luis, el antiguo novio, el viejo novio, the former boyfriend. When we put viejo or antiguo in front of novio, it means an ex. You do hear people, by the way, using ex-novio, ex-esposo, ex-novio, okay? But here it's not quite so painful as an ex, it's really kind of in the past, so it's antiguo.
Algo así. Pensé reunirme con él después, cuando me graduara.
I thought of getting back together with him cuando me graduara, when I graduated, because at that time it hadn't happened yet. They graduated at different times. He went off for a job. She went off, she was still doing her studies.
¿Pero qué? Es que tú dices que yo tenía que decidir entre mis estudios y él.
I had to decide between my studies and between him. He also had to decide.
¿Y se decidió por su profesión?
He decided for his profession rather than waiting for me, is what she says.
Al principio me sentí mal.
At first I felt bad.
Luis quería que yo...
Luis wanted that I should accompany him to Nueva York. And here, because he wanted, instead of he wants me to go to New York, it becomes a he wanted that I should go to New York. So they have to use a past subjunctive. It's not important that you know how to form that yet. Just know that this is the same thing as Luis quiere, he wants, in present. Luis quiere que yo le acompañe. In present, it would be Luis quiere que yo le acompañe. Luis wants that I should go with him. I should accompany him. But they have to move it into the past. So it goes into past with a past subjunctive instead. So it's not important that you know how they formed this acompañera, just that it means went with. He wanted me to go with him to New York.
Acompañar a Nueva York. Pero nunca se le ocurrió a él que...
It never occurred to him.
en Los Ángeles y esperarme a mí.
It never occurred to him to stay in Los Angeles and wait for me. So there's the thing. He took off. She kind of resented that. But then again, he had an opportunity. Okay.
Bueno, pero eso ya pasó.
Ya pasó. That's all over with.
Todavía tengo buenos recuerdos de Luis.
I have good
¿No se
memories of
volvieron a
Luis.
ver? No.
No se volvieron a ver. Didn't you see each other again? This is a way of saying again. Volver a and an infinitive. And the se means each other. No se volvieron a ver. Didn't you see each other again? Volver means to return, but you return to doing something. That means you do it again. Didn't you see each other again, is what she's asking. No, at first we were writing to each other. Imperfecto. At first we wrote back and forth to each other more than once. But later the letters got to be less and less. Cada vez, each time less frequent. More space between.
¿En qué piensas?
And what do you think?
Roberto, claro.
And she's thinking about Roberto.
Ya oíste el doctor. Seguro que se pondrá bien. Sabes, Raquel, aunque le he tenido un poco de envidia a Roberto, la verdad es que lo admiro.
Lo admiro, I admire him. Okay, so you've got a lot of these pronouns popping up. Lo admiro, I admire him, but not I'm saying to him. Who do you admire? I admire him. So it's a lo and not a le. Who does she admire? She admires him. It's a direct object, so it becomes lo admiro.
Sí, lo sé.
And lo sé, I know it.
Creo que también admiras a Jorge. Bueno, sí, pero es distinto. Jorge es mi novio, pero lo admiras como admiras a Roberto. Raquel, te debo pedir disculpas. Actué muy mal contigo allá en Puerto Rico la última vez que hablamos de Jorge.
Oh, she's apologizing for the big fight. And she told him, he's got a kind of a wandering eye. And she's like, all my friends say he's got a wandering eye. Why do all my friends say that, Jorge? Because he is. Yeah.
Ángela, la verdad es que yo no tengo derecho a meterme en tus asuntos.
I have no right to insert myself into your affairs. Okay, this is the way you say butt in. Meterme en tus asuntos. Meter is Meter is to take something and put it inside of something else. Meter es esto. Meter. Meter. So, if I translate that to the human realm, meterme en tus asuntos is to stick my nose in your business. Butt in. To put myself into your affairs. Meterme en tus asuntos. Tus asuntos just means your business.
Si lo prefieres, no hablamos más de Jorge.
If you prefer, we won't talk about Jorge
No,
anymore.
al contrario. Tú eres una buena amiga. Tal vez me haga bien hablar de él contigo. Si no te aburres.
Tenemos un largo camino por delante.
I've got a long drive
¿Me
ahead.
cuentas cómo lo conociste?
And why don't you tell me about how you met him, and you met him, not you met to him. So it can't be a le, it's a lo. ¿Cómo lo conociste? How did you meet him? And the lo is a him.
Amigo de un amigo de mi hermano.
Friend of a friend.
Nos conocimos en una fiesta que dieron unos
Nos conocimos. We met each other. We met each other. Okay? And she puts that in the past because, of course, it was an event. Nos
amigos de la
conocimos.
universidad. Me parecía que era muy simpático y esa misma semana salí con él. Fuimos al teatro y luego seguimos viéndonos.
So here she just tells past series of events, right?
Sí, en cierto sentido sí. Pero ahora no podría imaginar mi vida sin Jorge.
¿Ya han hablado de casarse?
Bueno, cuando le enseñé la copa de bodas de la abuela Rosa.
When I showed him, and I didn't show him off, I showed something to him. So se le enseñé, cuando le enseñé, when I showed him. And enseñar usually means to teach, but there it meant to show.
¿Sabes lo que me dijo?
¿Qué me dijo? Me dijo, me dijo. Most of the time, me dijo pairs up with a pronoun. ¿Sabes lo que me dijo? You know what he told me? ¿Sabes lo que me dijo?
Me dijo, cuando nos casemos, vamos a brindar con esta copa.
When we get married, we will toast with this goblet.
Sí, así es Jorge. Por eso lo quiero tanto.
Lo quiero tanto. I love him so much. That's why I love him, because he's so romantic. Sadly, he's romantic with everyone, but well, perhaps she'll figure that out. Okay. And then she talks a little bit about Arturo. Oh, I have gone way over. So anyway, el pobre Arturo. But Arturo gets a bright idea to track down through the university because he's a university student. Arturo is not a psychiatrist for nothing. Es muy listo. He's a very smart guy. And he figures out to track him down through there. Okay. We will bring it to an end there. I hope that has helped you with a few of the chunks that they used with el episodio. We'll assign, when we'll go through a couple more episodios, we're gonna pair up some of these words that work with le a lot. We'll carve out a little time next week to do some examples of le plus specific verbs, and where you can normally group those together as a le dije or a le dijo, you know, verbs that'll typically use that, and give you some practice with that la semana que viene, since that is kind of a hot topic. ¿Está bien?
Sí.
Magnifico. Okay, vale. I think we'll just give you that. That comprehensible input of having destinos is really, really helpful because you get them talking about a lot of different situations. And we'll plow through the next couple of episodios, the one we still skipped, and I'll give you the next one over to listen for next week. ¿Está bien?
Sí, sí,
Magnifico. Okay, vale. Bueno.